Shall we get started? So I know we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to do their summary and then give everybody a chance to chat. So I'd like to welcome you. It's my turn to say hello. I'm Sue Castriota. I am the Associate Provost at Keene State. Ellen and Talib, you'd like to kick it off. We'll have you do a quick summary. And again, Georgia, you're in the wings.
Okay, so I was just going to start us with the overview and pass it to Talib to share a little bit before we move on to the next project. So we're at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. We also have a campus in Tacoma, Washington. And we are a public alternative liberal arts campus. And so our Center for Community-Based Learning and Action is a public service center and where Talib and I work. And really we work on campus partnerships, community partnerships ongoing. And the COVID situation really did bring to light some really important pieces of how to maintain relationships during this remote time and how to, so we have some strategies that we wanted to share with ongoing programs like Gateways for Incarcerated Youth that Talib will share more about, and a pandemic academy that we started online, and some other partners with the farmworker partnerships with Farmworker Justice. So I will leave it at that and be interested in questions and pass it to Talib.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Talib Williams. I'm program coordinator for Gateways for Incarcerated Youth. And as I said in the video, Gateways is an inside-out program where we take Olympia-based Evergreen students and co-learn with incarcerated Evergreen students. And once COVID happened, obviously a lot of the structure changed for us because the facilities and our partners went under different restrictions than possibly our school, our county is within. So luckily, since it happened during our spring quarter, our program's a year-long program, we have already built relationships and established between the students. So that way we were able to go into a modified correspondence course. So since the relationships were already built, it was easy to just continue doing the work through email. And we were able to do that because the liaisons that we had with the other facilities were willing enough to do all the work of printing out all the scans and the documents that we were sending back and forth and getting it back to us. So luckily we built such a strong partnership with these other institutions that none of the learning and all of the mentoring and was still able to happen. So, and if you have any more questions, I can go further into that.
So Cheryl, it's your turn.
Okay, I'm Cheryl Wynn. I'm from Georgia College and State University in Milledgeville, Georgia. And Georgia College is designated as the University System of Georgia's public liberal arts university. And so our program, the programs that I teach in mostly are graduate nursing programs. And then also one of our presenters taught in the undergraduate nursing program. And so we just wanted to share with you kind of what we did in the midst of having to kind of suddenly halt all clinical instruction in healthcare facilities in the midst of COVID-19. So I know from our graduates, our nurse practitioner students had to stop clinical on March 29th. Our undergraduate students had to stop their practicum placements, which is their final clinical before they actually graduate and get out and take their state boards. So I heard someone say, doing a total, 180 or something. We really did have to come up with some creative ways to still get our students their clinical experiences, especially those that were at the end of their programs, our nurse practitioners that were end of their programs, or our RNs that were at the end of their programs, and having to get their clinical experiences in so that we could certify to the certification bodies that these students truly were ready to, you know, sit for state boards or sit for their national nurse practitioner certifications. So we had a couple of things that we came up with. I also am, I'm actually a coordinator of our DMP program, but also coordinator of our standardized patient experiences. And so we have a SIM center, a translational research center and simulation center at Georgia College. We partnered with a local hospital, and they had rented us out a whole floor where we actually had a in-person SIM center. But of course we couldn't use that. And so we had to figure out ways to do this virtually. So we normally would have had our standardized patient experience at the SIM center, but we did it virtually. And what that meant for the students, and we did some undergraduate simulation experiences virtually, as well as the standardized patients virtually. So we use WebEx. We use some WebEx all the time for delivery of our online learning. And so we use some WebEx sessions, and we actually had the standardized patients perform just virtually. And we had the students, of course, they could ask them the questions and they could get the history fine verbally, but then they would have to verbalize to us what physical exam they would do, what their diagnosis was, and then what their plan was. So just kind of verbalizing things that we normally would actually watch them do. And then we also already had a partnership with a company called Shadow Health. And Shadow Health does do digital clinical experiences. We were already partnered with them, and so it was easy for us to get back with them and say, hey, we're in a bind here. We've used you in the past, and is there some other digital clinical experience that we could tap into and use for our students? And so they were so very helpful and just stepped right up to the plate. And they gave us a pharmacology digital clinical experience that we previously had not used. And they also gave us a couple of pathophysiology digital clinical experiences that they were piloting, and said we could just use those for free. So that was a really good opportunity to partner with somebody that we already had a relationship with, and really helped us out. We were able to give the students I think 22 clinical hours through the Shadow Health clinical experience, and then another 5 through our standardized patient clinical experience. And then we had a debriefing. That's important when you do your standardized patients, because you want to do a debrief to see, you know, what the students learned from it. And the reactions from the students were very positive. They actually, a couple of the students that did the standardized patients said they were actually less nervous doing it that way, doing it virtually, than they would have been face-to-face. And so that was a positive. And then just when I really had an opportunity to look at the Shadow Health pharmacology cases, I felt the quality of them was really high. And we kind of all came away with, you know, this is something we should be incorporating all the time, you know, that to use the pharmacology digital clinical experience for the students. So that was kind of the 2 ways we came up with getting our students some clinical hours that they desperately needed.
Thanks, Cheryl. Okay, it looks like you have joined us. Are you ready to give us a quick summary of your work? And then what we're going to do is have everybody do a quick little summary, and then we'll take questions after that. So we're going to turn it over to you, and then Sarah, you'll follow, okay? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks. So hi, everybody. Sorry, I don't have, well, I'm not in my normal workplace right now. So, no video for me right now. But yeah, so what we did over the past few months was work with a lot of different community organizations to produce PPE. And that was, you know, we worked with the National Guard to produce N95 masks. We worked with our local fire department to produce a sort of protective tent that goes over stretchers. We produced a lot of face shields for our community, and it's just been a lot of collaborating with the community to kind of make this all happen, and a lot of different factors went into it. So that's kind of a short summary of my poster presentation.
Okay, Sarah, your turn.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Thumbs up. I'm Sarah Young, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of South Carolina, Aiken, in Aiken, South Carolina. And basically what my poster presentation was about was, I mean, it was really an assignment that I assigned in an intro to public policy class that I teach for political science students. But it ended up being more than just a class assignment, and it ended up being a kind of collaboration between the class and between administrators here at USC Aiken, and of course also state legislators. So what I wanted them to do was really have to stand up and deliver communication skills and policy. You know, I didn't just want to give them some basic assignments about policy, crafting policy. I really wanted to make the students kind of become active, engaged policy entrepreneurs. So what they had to do is create their own policy brief on a higher education funding topic. And they had to, they were divided into 3 teams. And they had to create their own original brief so that they had to, you know, exercise policy writing skills, but then they actually had to deliver it, you know, to a legislator. They had to lobby them, you know, and I thought it was a good way to really, you know, make the students understand that their role as citizens isn't just to be a passive, you know, a consumer of information, but, you know, they need to figure out how to articulate their voice to legislators. So in order to do that, they needed data on higher education funding, especially the needs of the school. And so we reached out to the chancellor, Dr. Jordan here at USC Aiken, and she and other administrators were very gracious. They actually came to class. They gave students data that they use in their own discussions with the state legislators. And so we actually had 3 state legislators come to class. They were going to physically come to class on campus, but, you know, obviously with the pandemic, that wasn't able to happen. So we had to turn it into a Zoom meeting where we had concurrent breakout room sessions. And it was, I think, a very positive experience where the students were leading the discussion. You know, it wasn't just a presentation that the reps were giving to them. They were leading the discussion. They were presenting policy, you know, recommendations. And I think it's just a really good way to bridge the gap between our school and our state legislatures, which, you know, being in a state in kind of a rural area, well, in some ways rural area, there's a little bit more like play to the community college campuses a lot of times in our neck of the woods. And this was a good way, I think, to show them that, hey, you know, we at liberal arts institutions are really doing something, and the students are applying real skills. And like they were sitting there like telling, you know, talking to the legislators about it. And so the students said that they felt more engaged as a result of the project. They felt better about government. And the other thing I really like is that even though it would have been nice to have them come and physically be on the campus, that was the way we envisioned it. I think in a way, it actually ended up being better the way it was, because we needed something, you know, during that pandemic to bring morale up. We needed something to keep the class interesting. And I think it was actually, you know, kind of a benefit that we ended up having to do this virtually. And the students had something to look forward to, you know. So yeah, that was basically my project.
That was awesome. Thanks, everybody. So I want to just start by saying, building on a little bit of what Sarah just said, it sounds like different wasn't necessarily bad for people. I mean, I think it opened the door for some opportunities to do things differently or think about things a little bit differently. And I'm just curious about how, if you feel that the project was richer or maybe just different because you had to do this remotely as opposed to face-to-face, which is, again, how it seems everybody had intended things. I know, Kay, yours was a little bit different. You got an opportunity to do something that you may not have intended, but maybe that's something you will continue to do now that, you know, the opportunity has been there. So again, we're not a large group, so if people want to just sort of shout out or start to speak or put up a hand, we can call on people, but let's just make this a nice discussion because again, we're a reasonable sized group.
Yeah, Kay Dart here. So it's interesting. We did do a lot of sort of more distance work together with the National Guard, and I think it was very interesting because it was, you know, it wasn't necessarily a teaching situation. It was more sort of like a collaborative research situation, and they were, of course, trying to make things happen as quickly as possible. So I think the major difference there was the expediency of it all. And that was just something really new to me, because sometimes in it just feels like with research you hit roadblocks, you might have to wait for certain things, but with the Guard it was just like, oh, we have to try to make this happen quickly because people need this PPE. But it was also just still like possible to just work with that distance, like a lot of sort of engineering companies sometimes do, to organize different tasks and things like that. So, but yeah, so some of the stuff was in person, which was also kind of different for a lot of people over the last few months.
Somebody else want to chime in? Scott, you look like you might be ready.
I was just going to say that, you know, watching what Kay and some of our other staff did in the Fastener Lab was completely amazing and awe-inspiring, as they connected to so many community partners. I mean, they connected with the P312 system in terms of one of the counties by us bringing in 3D printers. We had first responders, whether it was our local police force, paramedics, you know, responding to that need. That kind of started, Cheryl, with our nursing program. We have a BSN and a DNP program as well. Mm-hmm. So I can identify with having to get those clinical experiences completed in very innovative ways. And could we use virtual sim labs or not? And anyway, that's another story. But you know, it kind of started early in the process with these community partners requesting PPEs. Did we have any? Did our nursing program have any? And we, because students would not be in clinicals, actually donated a bunch to some different organizations. And then that led to our president, who is a research scientist, saying, you know, can we make some of these PPEs? And then, you know, Kay really pulling together what I consider to be the whole STEAM aspects, you know, incorporating art into the science and the engineering, and, you know, coming up with, I think, being very modest, coming up with a design that folks are using. So it was really, I mean, they were working around the clock. And so the urgency was immediate, which was sort of different from the time, if we think of doing research and developing something, trying it out, reflecting, there was just an immediate need to produce, and we were able to get other folks to engage in terms of funding, startup costs for those projects. And that's continued with the Fastener Lab also making safety devices for our campus. I don't know if you can see through my door back there, my assistant that's a thing on wheels, and there's a shield at the top. She has two protecting her. And so we have, you know, there are different things that are happening all across our campus as we prepare to open. So it kind of trickled down from the community need to now the university community. How do we get ready for opening in the fall? Sorry, that was really long.
Cheryl, are you ready? You look like you wanted to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it was definitely a challenge. Fortunately for us, we have 640 hours built into our nurse practitioner program, and the certifying bodies only require 500 of actual clinical hours. And Scott was probably alluding to some of the issues of real face-to-face patient interaction, clinical time versus some kind of virtual or simulation experience. So we were fortunate in that that was already built into our program, so it didn't affect us as far as those, actual clinical, face-to-face clinical time, but certainly was still a challenge to make sure that our students got what they needed. And as far as the standardized patients, that was kind of a win-win for them as well, because had we not moved to a virtual environment, we have those standardized patients that we had hired to actually utilize in our simulation lab would have just not been able to be utilized and would not been able to have been paid. So moving to a virtual situation worked out nicely for that. And the other thing that I think came out of it from the students, normally if we'd done that standardized patient situation in the sim lab face-to-face, we would have done our debriefing with the whole group of students at one time, which is probably, 50, 60 students, and kind of in a big room, letting the standardized patient, give some information, and then the faculty give some information. So I think having it in our own clinical groups, because we each had clinical groups of 6, and that's how we did our virtual standardized patients. And I think having that smaller kind of debriefing session also was beneficial in helping the students, be more willing to kind of verbalize how they thought the experience went. And like I said, a couple of students definitely said they felt less nervous doing it in a virtual environment than they did, face to face. So some good things came out of it, like you said. And as far as the pharmacology digital clinical experience from Shadow Health, as I got into those modules, like I said, I was looking at them, and I even said to the other faculty, why haven't we been using these before? These are great, and so we had only been using them for our advanced health assessment class up to that point. So that was another positive that came from it.
That's awesome. So Ellen and Talib, what did you have to turn around quickly? Because you had a long-standing partnership. So I'm guessing you had some standardized methods that you've been using. What did you have to do to sort of turn it around quickly?
Well, for us, our main thing was because we serve, like we all do, we're trying to serve populations that are often ignored, and people that are secluded or isolated in any type of manner. COVID is hitting them the worst. You're already isolated, and then now it's even more. The people that want to keep you from that aren't able to see you face to face. So our main thing was just trying to keep that open communication and just say we didn't forget about you. We're still here for you. We just can't get to you in the moment. And what helped is having built such long-standing partnerships with other groups or institutions. It allowed them to also think on those levels as well, that there's people affected here, and this is an all-around public health crisis that we need to attend to and make sure that people are doing okay during all of this. And for us in a mentoring program, face-to-face is invaluable. There's other programs that we connect with through the CCBLA, mentoring with youth and different things like that Zoom actually probably, or the way that we communicate now, has probably lifted a lot of barriers for people, that they're not as nervous face to face. They can be more themselves behind the screen. So that's been great. But at the same time, we just had to make sure that, regardless of what we're doing right now, that we got to make sure that we can get back to what we were doing, and then just use what we have integrated in this crisis to, I guess, help our programs evolve.
And I would just add to that, the Pandemic Academy was a big Zoom forum panel where panelists could speak from lots of locations, which was really helpful. It created access. And so we were able to tie in a lot of the issues like Talib just talked about, incarceration and immigrant detention, homelessness, the gig economy, all these just the range of issues and speakers that could be there on one screen, I think was actually really promising. And that took a really fast pivot to try to create. So that was just like one panel, 1 week of the series. So we had just a whole team of lots of faculty working on that and reaching out to community partners to present. But I think it was powerful just to see that, yeah, sometimes Zoom has some advantages, I guess.
Laura, did you find that with your folks, that Zoom or virtual interaction was advantageous? When your students, when your students had a chance to talk to folks remotely, do you think that maybe gave them a different feel, having a different kind of access?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do think that in some ways it would have been maybe a more powerful experience if we could have actually sat down face to face, you know, in real time with the legislators. But I do think the one thing that was really good about Zoom and doing it, you know, the way we did it, is that it was a time when everyone was so stressed out. And I think trust in government, you know, as a whole was really kind of maybe compromised. And what a great experience for our students to have this direct line, you know, to talk to their state legislators, like during that time specifically. So, I mean, I don't know that Zoom made it happen. I don't think Zoom was the greatest forum for it, but it made it happen. And it made it happen at exactly the time, I think, when a lot of students needed to feel some connection to the greater institutions, you know, that were there, political institutions. They needed that. But it was an interesting take on it because, like, we really weren't talking about COVID. We were talking about higher education funding. And we did talk a little bit about the pandemic towards the end and, you know, what that meant for higher education funding. So at the same time, the students were driving the discussion, you know, and I'll be honest with you, I think it's, at least with two of the groups, I think it helped because they probably were more comfortable with the technology than the legislators. So, you know, they could kind of be like a little bit more in charge. I don't know that the third meeting didn't exactly go that way, but I think at least for two, you know, that might've been an added benefit of it. But the main thing was the timing. Like they needed that connection during that stressful period. And that's exactly when they got it, so.
Sarah, I think that's a great opportunity for students to interact and really have civic engagement and be part of the decision-making process. You know, we are, even though we're in West Virginia, we're literally in the Baltimore, Washington suburb. We're about 60 miles from that. So we're as far east as you can go. And I could take a plane to London quicker than I can drive to our state capital, which is on the other side. So the geographic barrier there is very real for us because it's a significant investment for us to take students to our state capital, you know, to meet with our legislators. And that's definitely one of our challenges here, you know, being as we all are public institutions, but we are literally as far away as you can get from the state capitol we are literally right at the crux of Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and then DC is very, very close. So that's, you know, like I said, sometimes great, you know, really good things came out of this situation. So that's a great idea.
Can I ask
questions? Ask away. Oh.
I actually wanted to ask a question too. I believe Ellen and Talib, the Evergreen. It was one of your programs that was referenced kind of quickly on your slides. I think there was an agriculture worker strike. Was that a part of your presentation?
Yeah.
And how, could you talk a little bit more about that? That was really interesting.
Yeah, actually, it's so interesting. Today is kind of an important day in that effort. Farm workers, we're going to have an action in our state capital for the governor to take more seriously COVID protections, and they won their demands. So that they called off this action today, but it was early May, we had a forum where we were hearing about strikes that were happening in the packing sheds because of COVID, lack of COVID protections for farm workers, and especially people packing apples and fruits in the warehouses. And the other things I talked about was housing, farm worker housing, where they did things like they calculated a 6-foot separation based on like a person's laying down head to foot was 6 feet, and then they would put another bunk and they would count that as socially distant. And so it was really, and so the rates of infection were just skyrocketing, and a few sites did some testing all around, and of course asymptomatic people were working. And so it was a real crisis, and really a hot spot for COVID in the fields, in largely immigrant workforce in Eastern Washington. And so we've worked long-term with farm worker organizations, community development. They were presenting farm worker justice and just told us the cutting edge news of the strikes and the demands and the exploitation that was happening and the dangers of COVID. And so now here we are, like the cycle of actions and demands and organizing collectively resulted in the governor responding and improving conditions. I think there's still questions about, how workplaces are taking COVID seriously, and especially for important frontline food workers.
Thank you. That was awesome. Does anybody else have questions for anybody else in here, or anything else that we want to talk about that's related to the topic? Things that perhaps you'd like to see COPLAC do more of or do differently? Because one of my charges for us as we wrap up our group at the end, which we have time to go still, is what kinds of takeaways do we have? Are there recommendations? Are there thoughts that we have around community? So again, I'm happy to type some notes if people have some things they'd like to share. I got that one. Anybody else? Feel free to speak up. It's all good.
I think the process of creating campus community partnerships and some of the criteria of how to be reciprocal and respectful, I think are good things for us to be able to advocate.
Awesome, I got that. Any other thoughts?
I kind of have an open question to everybody. Did anybody make any new sort of community connections during COVID, and how did that go? Because sometimes it's a lot easier when you're in the groove of a normal academic semester to kind of reach out to people and kind of make things happen. And I'm just curious if anybody had success stories or any issues or anything like that.
That's an awesome question, Kate. I had that was my sort of similar thought, because some of the plans that people undertook were continuation of existing things, but I know yours was largely brand new. And you have to remind me, Kay, I'm sorry, did you reach out? Did the National Guard reach out to you? How did you get into what it was that you were doing?
Well, yeah, so as Scott mentioned, the president of Shepherd University reached out to me and asked if we can produce PPE, and I said, well, yes, and it kind of snowballed from there because a lot of different universities in West Virginia were also producing PPE. And so the National Guard was trying to coordinate all of those universities and different fabrication facilities, and we were part of that list. And we became working much closer with the Guard when our design sort of passed higher standards for N95 mass production. And so, and other local organizations approached us too, once sort of news articles and news stories spread that we were able to do this, and some of it was word of mouth. So, you know, like I think a lot of other people are saying, is like those community connections were vital to make some of this happen. Some that were already there, like reaching out to the school districts to lend 3D printers and things like that. And you know, some organizations kind of knew of Shepherd and were connected to Shepherd, but not necessarily connected to our lab. So it was a new experience for some of them. And I think, you know, some of the strategies that I talked about in my presentation kind of just helped facilitate that, where we immediately said, okay, yes, you need this. Let's work together and just move forward to try to make it happen. So I don't know, does that answer your question? It seemed a little long-winded.
I appreciate that. I'm just trying to determine how, again, how some of these partnerships came to be. Were they enhanced by the situation that, again, you all found yourselves in? Because I know Sarah had to sort of turn things around a little bit because of COVID. I know that Evergreen, right, Talib, you guys needed to turn some things around, and Ellen. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, how we can phrase that in a way that COPLAC can go back and maybe think about offering what, you know, workshops they can start to gather interest groups, because if there's enough interest in people doing, you know, having further conversations about the creation of community partnerships and how you nurture them so that they're reciprocal, they're respectful. How do you enhance maybe existing partnerships? Because like Kay said, maybe they had a relationship with a certain unit, but not more units on campus. So how do we reach out and make sure that we can connect in broader ways or introduce potential partners to other people on campus? So, you know, you're not only the person that they connect with, but then you're also a bridge to maybe a new partnership. It's like, have you met, fill in the blank here, that kind of thing. So I don't know, Scott, do you have some thoughts there? Because you look like you're ready to go again.
No, just to say, I mean, I think many of our campuses are literally in the middle of a small town, and that community town-ground relationship is so crucial. You know, Shepherdstown is extremely small, and we are the largest employer in the area, and we are just, I mean, we're literally right in the middle of downtown. And so we began meeting as a campus back in January with a campus health task force that included community representatives. So we always have a very, or have had a very strong and close town-gown relationship, other than, you know, everybody complains about parking. So it's not a parking problem, it's a walking problem. That's my answer. But anyway, I think it further solidified, you know, our institution, or what our COPLAC institutions can be, in terms of this incredible resource for the community, where we're working together. And I think of our I mean, I'm an accreditation person, so our accrediting agency, the Higher Learning Commission, for the greater good. And whether it's in an academic program, helping our students, a food pantry producing PPEs, or helping to set protocol for what the behaviors of our students are going to be like coming onto campus. I mean, I just feel like it really strengthened our need to continue to work together, and that we were all part of you know, this greater effort to address the immediate need in this pandemic. I don't know if that made any sense, but I felt like we were really, and continue to be very connected. And I know Rob, from his, you're muted, by the way.
I didn't want to jump. I didn't want to jump in.
Jump in. I talk too much.
Thanks. I'm Dr. Rob Tudor. I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Humanities and Social Sciences at Shepherd University. And I really enjoyed participating in my first COPLAC conference virtually. I just wanted to add, because I was thinking about when you've talked about the question of partnerships and what's happened, the first thought I had was that, God, we were just solving problems constantly as they were coming up. It was just solve this crisis, put out this fire. Who can we help next? Who can we help next? And then here we are now, the last day of June, looking back over 3 months, right? March, April, April, May, and June, and then half of March. So like about 4 months. And Scott, some of the people were working on this since January. And I think in that time, when I talk about partnerships, I think about, like you mentioned, the fact that Shepherdstown, which only has a resident population of 1,860 people, but there's a larger population outside of that. And like Scott mentioned earlier in another group, we draw from 4 different areas: West Virginia, from Maryland, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., and Virginia. But the partnerships just locally that happen here, like when everything slowed down, it just hurt our town so much. All the businesses depend upon so much. And we had this wonderful Contemporary American Theater Festival that happens here in the summer. And it generates, Scott, is it about $5 million that it generates into this region? Or was it $3 million? Do you remember?
Lots of millions, yeah. We'll go with 4.
From all over the country to this Contemporary American Theater Festival to our little town to be, and that's been put on hold until next year. So there's the partnerships that happened, and then when with the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent protests that happened there, groups like the Contemporary American Theater Festival and Shepherd University and churches and such got together and participated in protests and are continuing to have conversations and changing policies and having forums on this and saying, what can we do to respond to this? There's just so much change and innovation that's happening right now. It's been extraordinary to take it all in the long view.
I would say, sorry, Sarah, if I cut you off.
Go ahead.
I think one thing that helped as far as our programs, not really helped, but I would say even with longstanding partnerships, I think when COVID happened, it allowed our partners to really see, not necessarily that they took us for granted, but to see how valuable we really were in, helping service the people that, that we're servicing. But I know, and I can imagine it would have been the same for a lot of your schools that you work with, that not only were we trying to maintain relationships with our partners, but also like help our own school survive the crisis, help our students and different things like that. And I think that was because obviously our students who are helping us maintain these partnerships and keep these programs going. And we were, at Evergreen, we're worrying about the risk of students not coming back because we're such a, with COVID changing everything and people were going into hybrid models and different things like that, we weren't necessarily at Evergreen set up for online learning per se. That's just not what we do. So it did allow us to maybe catch up with the times a little bit and figure out how do we do things online, keep our students here so we can maintain these programs and maintain these partnerships because they are the vital pieces. And then just like Robert said, when everything happened with the protests and all of that energy, and we also have to think about what's going to happen again. Like now that there's more testing, it's not really a second wave. It's really still the first wave. It's just now that we're testing people, we're finding out, people are actually, so it's just our thinking now is, okay, we figured it out immediately, but we might be living in a COVID world moving forward, and trying to think about the partnerships that we did build or strengthen over this time? How do we create new ones when we're 1 foot virtual, 1 foot, personal? Like, it's just, those are the things I think maybe, how do we build new partnerships amidst the COVID type of era that we're in, when we can't be face to face and can't really show people what we actually can do in person, and to trust us as a partner or a new partner. I don't know. I mean, I might be talking in circles, but those are the things that come in my mind is, protecting our students and then protecting our programs, and then hopefully gaining more partners in the future. I think that's something that this COPLAC community could benefit from as well.
Sarah, you said you were ready to go.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is, it's maybe a little bit specific to the actual project that I was doing, but I think like one of the things that I'm hoping made this successful, and I feel like it was a successful project, is that we got 2 of the legislators were kind of new. So they were like first in, and we're trying to build, like, from the very beginning, this very this relationship that shows them that we're really vital and we're really important. And and you've also got to, like, think again, the tendency is to be more geared, if there is any higher education funding, to the community colleges. And I'm not getting in a war with the community colleges either. I mean, they need money and funding too, but it's just that's the tendency. If there is support, it seems like there's more messaging to them. And so getting these new legislators in, like fairly new legislators, one, it was her very first term, and the other one, it was just his second term. We're building it from, like, the very beginning, that we're valuable, we're valid. And then the other thing is that, there's going to be cuts from the state legislature, obviously coming. They're under huge pressure to do everything, right? To fund public health, to fund everything. And I mean, I'm under no delusions that we're going to get tons of money, this coming cycle or even next year. But if we've got our face out there and we've got students, like, looking really good and sharp and showing that they can hustle, like, even in a really hard, difficult time, they can keep their education going and their initiative up, I think we have a better chance of trying to, like, you were talking about, to live, like, protect our students, protect our resources. I'm thinking that we can protect our resources a little bit better if we have that face on it. And one of the things I was happy about with our situation is that he was a 3-year legislator. They had told me through the chancellor's office that he'd been kind of active on campus, but not, kind of like maybe there was a relationship there, but he was also a little on the outside. He gave us a wonderful quote at the end and seemed genuinely, like, impressed with the students and what they did and how they talked to him. And I just think it's hopefully something that we're building from the ground up. Of course, he's got to get reelected now, right? Over and over and over again too. But whatever. Yeah, a lot of times it's easier to get to the newer folks, I think, than some of the longer term incumbents. So those are my general thoughts.
I just wanted to add one learning piece that I realized as we were going through trying to pivot for COVID, that so many of our community partners and community issues, it was all new for them too. Like, they couldn't quite gauge whether they could be remote, whether they could engage students. So it seemed like maybe we were kind of reaching out to just figure out, is it a go, is it not? And actually it was more of an evolution of figuring out, like, how would they operate as well as how would we operate.
Did you want to chime in too? Maybe.
Yeah, so I just want to add it from what I'm hearing from some people, and I definitely experienced this in my situation, is about advocacy for our different programs and spaces, and telling people that they are legitimate. Before COVID, I think one issue that I had with trying to build community partnerships was people not really knowing my lab existed. And so when COVID hit and, you know, we could do PPE, it seemed like it was kind of an emergency. And so people just said, oh yes, go to this person, or, you know, go here. And it really wasn't like questioning. It was this sense of immediacy that really helped build things faster. And then, you know, through that, advocating for those to make sure that they can get it done. And of course, you know, we all want to get it done as best we can. So we all stepped up. And I think that's kind of important to think about continuing on, is to maybe not necessarily rethink what you have or the resources, and just kind of trust those people around you.
I like that. Anybody else have anything that they want to add, or any further thoughts? Because I've got some good notes to share. Scott?
I'm good.
Oh, okay. Well, you unmuted, so I was like, oh, he's ready to go. Yeah, he's not so ready to go. No, that's perfect. Oh, no, I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to ask their questions, provide their thoughts. I know it's getting to the end of the day, and we've got only 5 minutes left in our session, and then we have the wrap up. So I think Cole and Melinda will have a few words, and I believe there's also trivia with prizes that I should be encouraging you to participate in. If you need any answers, no, I'm kidding. Any last minute thoughts, any words of wisdom as we wrap up from anybody? I mean, this has been great. I have really enjoyed getting to hear all of your thoughts and your experiences.
Something just came to mind real quick, and I wanted to ask Cheryl Wynn. Was any of your students that were close to graduating actually have an opportunity to maybe help in the hospitals or the ERs?
Well,
Yeah,
that was part of the issue, actually. Not only did they cut off clinical for our nurse practitioner students, a lot of our nurse practitioner students were RNs working on the front lines. So they were RNs because most all of our students are full-time employees, plus come into the program to do their family nurse practitioner. So we had to recognize that as well. I know one student that I'm an advisor for actually called me, and he wound up withdrawn from the program because he actually got COVID from working. He was a home health nurse and was in the family nurse practitioner program. So he wrote me just the other day and said, you know, how do I petition to come back in? So we kind of really had to relax our withdrawal dates a little bit, you know, where we had some kind of hard and fast withdrawal dates. We had, because of the situation where we had our students who were actually on the front lines in ICUs and in ERs, you know, that were working on it, in it. So that was an issue as well. So it was quite a challenging time there for a minute, you know, trying to support them, you know, in their front line, plus support them in their student role, you know, and trying to, you know, figure all that out as we were going along.
Cheryl, did your state legislature or board of nursing step in at all? Talib, I know on our end, our state actually took steps to help students to accelerate their pathway towards licensure in taking the NCLEX exam.
They did. They actually stepped in with the undergraduate students, saying that they could go ahead and start practicing. I've been a nurse for a very long time. So when I got out of nursing school, we did that. We started as graduate nurses, and then when we passed our state boards, we became RNs. So they kind of reverted back, I felt like, a little bit to that, you know, where they went ahead and let them start practicing, and then, you know, then let them take their NCLEX. So yes, they did step in and do that for the undergraduate RN students.
Any other questions? Because if not, I want to thank you. This was wonderful. I've learned a lot about not only your institutions, but also some really interesting thoughts about partnerships and how to go about creating them. And I'll try to do a decent job of sending along some notes on behalf of this group. So I appreciate everything that you put forward. Again, just one quick reminder that at 5:45, closing remarks. So if you could be there, that would be wonderful. I'll look forward to seeing you. And again, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Take care.